Thank you.
Thank you, James. That was great. If you predict a return of volatility, please let us know. So our next presenter, David Courtier, founder and Chief Executive Officer of TellusLabs.
We are in the business at TellusLabs of building answers from satellite imagery, and we're focused on the intersection of problems that are of economic and environmental significance. It's a really fun time to be in the space answers business. We're living in an age of abundance when it comes to views of our planet from on orbit. And in a way, that abundance is its own challenge. I want to share with you a little bit about the opportunity we see and why my co-founder, Professor Mark Friedel, and I built TellusLabs not too long ago. And then I really want to spend some time on our signature product, our flagship agricultural intelligence product. I don't know, I feel funny calling it flagship. When you have one product, it's definitely your flagship. It's downstairs in the Innovators Pavilion, and it's a lot of fun. My colleague Fernando is showing folks that right now. We think there's a real opportunity right now in space, in new space, and I'll tell you a couple surprising things. One is it's not a new opportunity. So as much venture capital is flown into new space platforms, the unsaid truth is that NASA and the European Space Agency quietly started watching nearly everything, nearly everywhere, nearly all the time 20 years ago. And that data has been locked up in government archives, built for scientists, by scientists. And we are in the business of unstranding that data, putting it in contact with modern machine learning. We are 12 people in Boston, Mass, venture-backed, and we had a vision that unlocking that data and putting it in contact with modern methods, we could start solving some real problems that matter. And the first problem we tackled was agriculture. The kind of satellites that we know best are the kind of satellites that do large-scale observation hyper-frequently. They're looking 4, 5, 6, 8 times a day. And agriculture is just uniquely well suited to that kind of intensity of observation. The US corn crop, which we're live on right now, 180 million acres of corn and soy, we're watching it every day and have been since the 4th of July. That crop, for every different farmer's field in the country, there are 10 days that are just absolutely crucial for that crop. The challenge is it's a different 10 days. And so if you're not watching every day, you might as well not be watching. And the kind of tech it takes to do that kind of operational observation at continental scale is just weird. There's just not a lot of people that worry about that. And my co-founder, Mark Friedel, who I met back in 2003 when I was starting my PhD, he was one of the first weirdos to go for this problem. He was building the very first operational global map of the world. So every quarter, Mark and team put out a new map of the entire land surface of the planet. And that happened back in 2003. So if you follow any of the tech behind what's happening in machine learning, imagine how hard that was. So he's got all the bruises to show for how tough this problem is. And he and I got together a couple of years ago around a colleague that we knew, and we realized, gosh, it's about time that some of that stuff comes off the lab bench and starts having a practical impact in the world. And what was missing was a platform. We call it Argus. We've heard a little bit more about the Argus Exchange. We might need to rebrand our platform, we'll see. But it's a system for connecting weather, satellite data, and ground observation into a modern machine learning framework. And then we are the first customer of Argus. We do have some clients that are getting closer to direct access to that system, but we're the first customers, and we built an app on top of it. We call it Kernel. And so it's a global ag intelligence platform. And we think that's a problem that's way overdue. There's $7 trillion in agriculture. 1.3 billion farmers transform 40% of the world's land surface, and basically the market is moving on operational GFS weather forecasts every 4 hours. When you talk to folks that are deep in that space, they'll admit to you, the market movements are not rational. They're not based on what might really happen to those crops. They're a convenient index. And so what's missing is some kind of consistent, global, scientifically sound, objective signal on the world's harvest. So we started in the United States. We were out of sample last summer. We're really proud of that outcome. It's honestly a big part of the reason why we closed the great round in December, which is that we were 2 months ahead of the USDA. So we If there's a number to remember coming out of today, it's 52.1. That's how many bushels an acre we produced in soy last year. It was a record-breaking year, and we nailed that number 2 months early. And this summer, we're proud to have a great cohort of customers in the kernel product. It's an API as well as a web app. And for a lot of our customers, we're actually not shy about putting them in direct contact with the ingredients. We encourage them to beat us when it comes to modeling. What's coming next? We're in South America right now. We are obsessed about Brazil and Argentina. And we will be global. This time next year, we will be covering 85 to 95% of the world's corn, soy, and wheat. And that's just early innings for TellusLabs. We're really excited about any environmental signal that has a strong economic impact. We think that the time has come to get a lot sharper pencil on these kind of really important societal problems.
I've got a couple of questions. So again, competitors, Orbital Insights has been around for a while.
Yeah, I can't say we don't have any, right?
Okay. So again, how do you differentiate yourself?
We find ourselves on stage with Orbital a lot, and honestly, in the space we're in, we better be rooting for Planet Labs and Orbital and a lot of these funds. These firms. There's just a tremendous amount of investment that's coming into this space. We're quite different from any peer that we know of in the sense that we are completely focused on global cadence imagery. So imagery that images the entire planet every day. It sounds like a trivial difference, but the imagery you're used to looking at in Google Earth and Google Maps, that's high-res imagery. And what these companies are doing, like Planet and Orbital, is they're training computers to do what our eyes do when we look at Google Maps. And they can pull features out, like ball fields and roads and missiles and tanks. And they can do that very effectively. What we look at are pixels that are the size of this building, but they've been collected for 20 years. And they have not just red, green, and blue, but 36 spectral bands of color, which is really important for vegetation and remote sensing. And those satellites, they are consistent through time. They can calibrate it against the moon every day by these scientists. So that means we get 20 years of El Nino, La Nina variation. We get 20 at-bats around historical yield for row crops. And without that kind of science sensor, these guys suffer from a challenge that it's kind of, I feel sheepish pointing it out, but it's just that these high-resolution sensors are new. And so there isn't much of a track record. And the other issue with these sensors is the reason they can show you those tanks and cars is they're telescopes. So the field of view on the ground is very narrow. If you add up all the high resolutions, then 2% of the Earth's surface each day. We're the first customer. Our satellites collectively image the entire orb 20 times a day. So it's just a completely different ballgame. And the tech and the machine learning and the tools you build is different. So we're pointed at different problem sets. They're both important problem sets, but they're quite distinct.
So I want to ask the same question I asked the guy with the acting.
Oh, that's coming.
Right, yeah.
First 5 minutes.
Yeah,
You
you nailed the acting report like 2 months early. I mean, maybe we should sit down, have a coffee. I can talk to you about
I have some regrets. Fernando's in back from TellusLabs. You might have some regrets too.
Yeah, so, why are we here?
Why do you even know my name or what we're doing? That's a good question. I think it's a slightly different answer in that, look, we aspire to make an impact around the global environment. And I know that sounds kind of Pollyannish, but we have been approached by funds. We have funds that are customers right now. We're really proud of our customer base. We've been approached with approaches around acquisition. And for us, a lot of the impact, really the shortest answer to your question is, if we did that, then you wouldn't know who we are. And you wouldn't know about our signal. And our signal is going to have value down to the farm scale. So a lot of the things that Paul was talking about, we're passionate about that as well. We see a role at whole field level. We think that's a type of agricultural analytics that doesn't exist today. That word is new. We're trying to advocate for that word. It's not precision ag. It's helping farmers make decisions at the entire field scale. And I don't think we get to be a part of any story like that for insurance or real estate or farm or growing services if we're in-house at a hedge fund somewhere. But the other things that I think James mentioned are true of us as well. We wouldn't really know quite what to do with the signal. Our expertise is satellites, and we draw a pretty firm line at the supply side and questions where if you don't ask it with satellites, you're not going to get an answer.
Can you talk a little bit, obviously we understand the trading application, but what the food security use case is for this?
For sure. I mean, we get a lot of questions around that go like this, sort of, corn is corn is corn. If you build models that perform this well in the United States, how about giving us an early look at food insecurity in Africa? How about a look at the harvest in North Korea? I mean, everybody likes to use North Korea as a good example, right? And we are getting, I think macro folks that are quite interested in crop coverage for us internationally that has currency implications for countries because of the importance of that crop in country. We think that there's value in an early warning system, Gary, and we think that a lot of the signal, maybe not the finished yield forecast, those are always going to be best in countries like this that have USDA organizations that have been in business for 150 years. There is no truth in Argentina that you can take to the bank, or in much less in North Africa, but we think a lot of the first derivatives, the change signals that are so important to our algorithms, we think those can serve as really interesting early warning type signals in the platform.
Can you tell, I thought your answer before about how you differentiate versus the Orbital Insights of the world was clear to the extent that you're getting different imagery and different access to satellites and information, but what agreements or relationships do you have in place to maintain that barrier? And what are the risks around that changing over time?
For sure, Jared. I mean, look, when you're using license-free for commercial use imagery and weather for everything that you do, there's obviously a defensibility question. You can bet our lead investors have asked us that question before they wrote their checks last winter. A couple of points. First of all, this data has been available for this kind of work for 20 years. And we're the first people we know that are doing this kind of a solve against it. So it's just really hard. So we're taking a little bit of comfort in the challenges we're finding. And if I'm frank about it, there's way more challenge now than we ever thought at the outset in bringing this data together. The other part of the story is that the stability of the NASA and European Space Agency pipelines is very strong. I feel like I should knock on wood every time I say it because I'm a company that struggles if those taps get turned off. But the missions that we're going against are the missions that provide the surveillance for hurricanes and weather systems and militaries. They're just not going away. These are decades-deep launch pipelines. So we have a stable, long-term signal that we have access to. And I think defensibility for us is around our core IP, around that connection point into the systems. It's data fusion, combining multiple sensors. One sensor is almost never enough. And it's integrating disk-like data, weather, ground observation, and satellite into one signal. And I don't think we're not Luddites about commercial satellite imagery. We talked to Planet, and we'd be interested in using commercial imagery if it helped in the models that we build. The biggest difference between us and Orbital, though, I should say, is you're never going to, well, never is a big word, but you're not going to hear me talk about counting cars in parking lots. So I think counting cars in parking lots is cool, and also looking at the lids of strategic oil reserve systems. I mean, and those are ideas that go back to the 80s. We've been doing them with helicopters for a long time. We're very, very focused on agriculture. We think it's just a huge space. And if you see us do something new, which you will next year, it'll be forestry or irrigation or drinking water. It's going to be an environmental application adjacent to agriculture. And we don't know of any other company in the satellite imagery analytics space that has that laser focus on one asset class and one problem. And I mean, how small we are is probably the most practical thing to do. But it's not a function of our size, it's a function of sort of the commitment that this is a space where we're really going to make a difference.
But is the edge not just in the access to the data, it's the machine intelligence that you built, right? That's the piece that would be sustainable, I would guess.
That's right. We really spent a lot of time building physically meaningful physical features of what's happening on the ground. And that, plus the machine learning algorithms that we operate, is a part of why we're able to do this. And our customers get access to the ingredients and a lot of help along the way to understand them. We encourage them to even surprise us with what they do with it. But you're right, I think a lot of the IP for us is in the answers machine.
So how easy is it to go to then another kind of crop? Is it so the grains and the corns, that's like massive, but can you do tomatoes, mushrooms, whatever, wheat?
I think mushrooms is something we're going to pause on. But that said, there are some really nice row crops that are suitable. It's harder for smaller crop sizes.
Coffee.
But we get asked about coffee, sugar. Sugar's coming. The softs are coming. And for us, they'll start with sugar versus coffee. So yeah, there's a huge ramp in terms of crop coverage and geographic coverage for us.
I have to add that I've got some colleagues who each year take clients on a very long-lasting crop tour around the Midwest, and I think they're a bit upset that that tour is probably coming to an end.
We can sympathize. We were on tour, Fernando and I, that we got our boots dirty. We figured, based in Cambridge, Mass, we better put some dirt on our boots, given the business that we're in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.